open carry, and you've got the ding-dong female cop running up with a shotgun in his face like she's found a terrorist. What a moron. Dallas-Fort Worth city plans heavy police presence to discourage border protests. Discourage, because they're going to ship them into Grand Prairie by the tens of thousands. And the cops are telling you, with the mayor, American citizens, you keep your head down and shut up, trash. We got the new political class here. They're going to vote to turn Texas blue and take those guns. Oh, yeah, Dallas is going Democrat, folks. And again, you're like, well, at least, Republicans are bad, too. And in Texas, the Republican platform is pretty darn good, folks. But not for long. They will ban the guns, and they will send the armored vehicles. There will be a civil war. The cops love it, I guess. I know they actually don't love it, but you're going to be where the rubber meets the road, buds. Continuing here, coming soon, TSA mind-reading scanners to catch terrorists. Interesting article by Paul Watson. Hobby Lobby decision creates small island of freedom in ocean of statism. That's on Infowars.com. What's your startlingly, that's hard to read. What your startlingly intimate, voyeuristic NSA file looks like. That's harder than saying he did something with seashells by the seashore. I forget that tongue twister we all did when we were a kid. Top general says Mexican border security now existential threat to U.S. What are the machines thinking? John Rappaport. And this is going to tie into our next guest. I just printed it again, guys. It's on the printer out there. The almighty dollar is in peril as the global de-dollarization trend accelerates. Very important article by Michael Schneider up on Infowars.com. But I do want to briefly get to this video by Mikhail Phelan up on Infowars.com on this incredible incident that's only now been released via the trial of what happens when you openly engage in open carry. And you look at the look on this woman's face, this cop. I mean, she sees the enemy, and that is, of course, a citizen. And they will come to known open carry demonstrations, even in San Antonio, and will arrest people till we show up 1,500. And then as soon as our demonstration was over, when there was a few people left, they would arrest them. Even though the state has said the ordinance in San Antonio is illegal, the police chief doesn't care because he knows best, because we can't have people walking around with guns because you want to be the only one with a gun. You want to feel special with a gun on your hip where we can't have guns on our hip. Now, I know most cops, national surveys show over 95%, look it up, and study after study are pro-gun because they get it. But the police chiefs work for the feds by and large. I don't care if it's Austin, Texas, or San Antonio. And they need to be put in their place. This is our country. You're not the only one that gets to have a gun. You understand that? Get that through your head. And they said they were going to arrest us when we came down there to demonstrate, 1,500 of us with the land commissioner, Jerry Patterson. They didn't do that, did they? No, they didn't. And I didn't read off a teleprompter when I gave my speech. I screamed so loud I blew my voice out for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. I yell so loud, folks, my larynx starts bleeding. That's because I love freedom. First speech since the Alamo fell on the grounds, because it was a feedlot until the 40s. And then the Daughters of the Republic of Texas wouldn't allow any speeches there. But Patterson with the state has been taking it over. I'm not knocking the Daughters. I've had family that's in it. But, let's just say this. We're going to have it for what it is. It's a Second Amendment, pro-liberty shrine. And that's just the way it is. The men are taking it back over. It's the men that died. Headline, the almighty dollar is in peril as the global de-dollarization trend accelerates. And joining us is New York Times bestseller James Rickards. The Death of Money is his latest book, The Coming Collapse of the International Monetary System. We're going to spend the first half of the interview talking about where he sees the current system going, but he's also a major whistleblower who witnessed the insider trading leading up to 9/11. And he's going to basically break it all down today, proving complete prior knowledge by trading firms directly connected to the Central Intelligence Agency. And that was in Der Spiegel and a few U.S. papers the week after 9/11. but not the details, not an eyewitness to it. So this is bombshell info coming up here in just a few minutes. Again, his new book, The Death of Money. Now, before we go any further, we're seeing the controlled collapse of our nation. As he said a few weeks ago in England, General Petraeus, former head of the CIA, said, we're getting rid of the U.S., we're bringing in the North American Union. They have to do that. Mexico has opened their southern border to South Americans, Central Americans, to flood. That is only the detonator for the larger explosion for the huge waves that will come after that will dwarf it. And that's already beginning. That's why they announced that they let the kids go free, and now their parents, and now the felons, 36,000 of them in one release last month. I'm going to say that again. The sheriff of Travis County, where I live in Austin, Texas, where the syndicated broadcast comes to you from, is criticized in the Austin Chronicle this week, saying how dare him deport 13 people a week. By the way, those are aggravated felons. They say Austin's supposed to be a sanctuary city, a, quote, secure community, but he's deporting 13 a week in a city of over 1,200,000 people that has over 5,000 illegals coming here a week. Oh, my gosh. It's just BS and disingenuous, says Amelia Ruiz Fisher of the Texas Civil Rights Project. Basically, a La Raza front run by Jim Harrington on Sheriff Hamilton's list is purporting to reflect serious offenses associated with the ESCOM detainees, but were arrested for those crimes, not immigration offenses. And they just say he's deporting, but he's bringing them to ICE. ICE is letting them loose. The sheriff, when they arrest illegals and they have felony records, he's deporting them. Oh, my, how mean. And I've talked to Travis County prosecutors who've been in my office off record. And they said, no, the judges just released them for drunk driving, you name it. People are being now released, folks, for aggravated assault with a weapon. The illegals are above the law. And how dare them all not be legalized and given free welfare immediately? How racist. When they're not chanting La Raza, Viva La Mexico, or Viva Honduras or Guatemala, we have the video of the rallies in Austin. Why, they put American flags on their heads. How mean of the black sheriff, the evil racist sheriff. So, I mean, the country's just wide open. And it's lawlessness funding Al-Qaeda to attack every Christian they can in the Middle East. It's lawless to shut down the power plants and Obamacare. It's all totally evil. Look at these headlines, and we're going to our guest. Look at these headlines. What comes after America? After America, there's North America. Dr. Corsi today has written an article. He's coming on tomorrow, following our lead, on the announcement of the North American Union. Again, we played that a few weeks ago, but now WorldNet Daily has reported on it. Continuing, coming soon, TSA mind-reading scanners to catch terrorists. Paul Joseph Watson. Actually, if you look at CBS News and MSNBC from 2002, they put in 5 airports passive brain scanners then. Now they're going to roll them out. Brain scanners. Hobby Lobby decision, again, creates small island of freedom and ocean of statism. A good Ron Paul interview. That's just some of the news up on Infowars.com. And I wanted to get into some of the news dealing with the open borders and then right to our guest. But it is confirmed now that Obama is ordering the illegals bust deeper into the country. We broke it in mid-June. It is now confirmed by the New York Times. McClatchy, some on right push to impeach Obama in Congress and at the state level. Absolutely. I mean, the president opening the borders up, 100% impeached, indicted in the House, convicted in the Senate, open and shut. Backlash stirs in U.S. against foreign worker visa acceleration because the jobs are being lost. The wages are going down. We don't need more cheap engineers, folks. If we had a need for them, it'd be okay. But it's destroying the way of life. And it just continues on from there. Feds, again, to bring in riot squads against illegal immigration protesters. No, how dare them go when the DHS buses ship the illegals in to be put on Greyhounds? How dare them be pointing this out? 3 weeks after we broke it. How dare this issue be raised? So now riot police are coming. And again, in Grand Prairie, Texas, my old stomping grounds, that's where I'm from, Rockwall in that area, DFW Metroplex, multiple cities are saying, we're going to have riot police out to discourage you demonstrating when we ship tens of thousands in to be housed in Grand Prairie. Look at the mayor. I mean, hey, you better not come out. Cops will be there. I mean, think of that. Think of what America has turned into. We have that clip coming up. It's up on Infowars.com. It's on Channel 11, CBS. Sources, feds are bringing riot squads against illegal immigration protesters in Dallas and in Southern California. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I mean, this government is pure criminal. Where is Rick Perry declaring civil emergency and ordering the Texas Guard out to go down there and to grab those people and to forcibly bus them over to Mexico and then continue to do it? Because once the border fully implodes, which has now happened, if the next wave makes it, folks, it'll be wide open forever, which is the plan. And then they'll put a police state in with domestic checkpoints for you and me, not the illegals who are above the law. Texas Dem, Obama administration releasing 500 mothers with children per day. That's a whitewash number in McAllen alone. Yeah, we were down there and broke that. Now that's mainstream news, Daily Caller. Scabies spreads among border detainees. Using the word illegal is the N-word, according to CNN. Viva La Raza, pro-illegal activist chant. Up with the race. Go home to Europe. Immigration rallies clash in California. Go back to Europe. There's the headline, Washington Times. Top general says Mexico border security now existential threat to U.S. That's the head of Northcom saying that and urges Congress for help. That's a big deal. I should cover that more, but I'll do it in the next hour. We're going to keep our guests a little bit with us into the next hour. I really appreciate him coming on with us. This is such a big deal, what you're about to hear in the next hour. The death of money, the coming collapse of the international monetary system. And what's in the news today? There is an acceleration out of the dollar by allies like South Korea, not just China, not just Russia, not just Japan, not just the Middle East. This is a huge deal and being done by design. Because before global governance can come in, the dollar has to finally die. They're going to ride the horse till it dies. But we have a real financial expert with us. The first half of the interview, we're going to skip this network break. This is so important. With James Rickards, will be on the monetary issues and his new book and his last best-selling book as well, Currency Wars. Then we will get into the insider trading. He witnesses an incredible whistleblower. James Rickards is the author of the national bestseller Currency Wars, The Making of the Next Global Crisis, that predicted everything that happened in 2008. The Death of Money of the Coming Collapse of the International Monetary System is his latest book. He is a portfolio manager and partner in the Merchant Bank based in New York. He's also a counselor and investment advisor and has held senior positions at Citibank, Long-Term Capital Management, and Caxton Associates. In '98, he was the principal negotiator for the rescue of LTCM sponsored by the Federal Reserve. His clients include institutional investors and government directorates. Mr. Rickards has delivered papers on risk at the Singularity University, Los Alamos National Laboratory, and has written numerous articles on risk management. He is also an advisor on capital markets to the U.S. intelligence community and the Office of the Secretary of Defense. JamesRickardsProject.com is the website. We'll put that up on screen for TV viewers. Thank you for coming on, sir. I really appreciate it. And you've got the floor to break down in layman's terms, but then more technical, what we face, where we are. And then I want to get into the big picture and basically how people can protect themselves. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Alex. Great to be with you. And yeah, the new book, The Death of Money, it sounds like a provocative title, but it's actually not meant to be that provocative. The international monetary system has collapsed 3 times in the past 100 years. It collapsed in 1914, again in 1939, and again in 1971. So these collapses happen every 30 or 40 years, and it's been a little over 40 years since the last one. Now, that doesn't mean it collapses tomorrow like clockwork. It just means that no one should be surprised if it does. And there are plenty of warning signs, official actions, pointing very much in this direction. And then, so what I do in the book is I take the reader through the instability of the system. I say, it's not a question of committing errors in the future. The errors have already been committed. The blunders have already been made. It's like snow that's piled up and we're waiting for the avalanche. We're just waiting for that one snowflake to bring it all tumbling down. So that's actually fairly foreseeable. What I try to do is say, okay, when that happens, because it has happened 3 times before, what comes next? What will the future international monetary system look like? And then go all the way back to square one. What can investors do today to sort of prepare for that? So that's the big picture. You know, my first book, Currency Wars, came out in 2011. And if you open up to chapter 8 of Currency Wars, guess what's there? It talks about Ukraine, Gazprom, Russia, natural gas as a weapon, et cetera. In other words, all the things that are happening today were in my 2011 book. If you want to know what's going to happen 2 or 3 years from now, read the new book, because that really is the purpose, is to look over the horizon and see what's coming.
Obviously, everyone should get
now,
the book. Everyone should get the book, and it's available. You can link through it, JamesRickardsProject.com or Amazon, you name it. Go ahead.
Now, let's get specific with regard to the dollar, Alex. You know, when you write a book and it comes out, hopefully you get a lot of things right. But one of the things you ask yourself is, well, did I get anything wrong? Is there anything I might have missed? And looking at the book, which has only been out for a few months, I would say the one thing is things that I thought might take a year or two to play out are actually playing out now. Notice this collapse is happening faster than I thought, even when I wrote the book last year. And just to be specific, imagine a stool with 3 legs, and resting on the stool is the dollar. And the 3 legs are Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia, the 3 props, if you will, under the dollar. Let's take them one at a time. Saudi Arabia, that's basically the story of the petrodollar. You know, in 1974, in the late 70s, the dollar almost collapsed at that time. We had 50% inflation between 1977 and 1981. We had 3 recessions back to back to back. You know, the price of gold went up 2,000%. It was a complete run on the dollar. Henry Kissinger struck a deal with the Saudi Arabians, with the royal family in Saudi Arabia, to price oil in dollars. Now, there is no reason then or now why oil has to be priced in dollars. At the time, it could have been priced in Deutschmarks or Japanese yen, Swiss francs, or gold. Today, it could be priced in euros, maybe dollars and the other things. But there's no reason oil has to be priced exclusively in dollars. But it was. That put enormous prop under the dollar, because everyone needs oil. So if oil is priced in dollars and you need oil, that means you need dollars. People who don't have any other reason to want dollars have to have them to buy the oil. So that was a support for the dollar. Now, what was the other side of the deal? The other side of the deal is that we, the United States, would guarantee the national security of Saudi Arabia. We would prop up the House of Saud. Now, that deal lasted until last December. Last December, President Obama stabbed the Saudi Arabians in the back by anointing Iran as the regional hegemonic power in the Middle East. Now, what that means is, you know, U.S. is withdrawing power from around the world. That's very obvious, and the president said so in his speech at West Point. But what he wants to do is sort of leave a cop on the beat. So in every hotspot around the world, there's some power that's going to kind of take care of things in the neighborhood, if you want to think of it that way. Well, the U.S. greenlighted Iran as the cop on the beat in the Middle East. We greenlighted their nuclear ambitions. I know there are these talks underway, but the fact is the centrifuges are still spinning. The Iraq reactor is still operating, and that is only good for one thing, which is it produces plutonium, which is only good for one thing, which is making atomic weapons. And so that's going full speed ahead. So the Saudi Arabians took that as a stab in the back, and they should. And by the way, in a recent briefing given by very high-level U.S. officials to the King of Saudi Arabia, they went through this long, 45-minute presentation about all the nuance in our policy with Iran and all that. And the king, who I think is 91 or 92 years old, at the end of it, he just grunted and said, "They get one, we get one." Those are his exact words. And what he meant was Iran gets a nuke, Saudi Arabia, they get nukes the next day. They'll just fly them in from Pakistan. So now that we've reneged on our side of the deal, no longer guaranteeing the security of Saudi Arabia, they feel free to renege on their side of the deal, supporting the dollar. So watch for oil to suddenly be priced in euros and other currencies. Now over to China. What's China doing? Well, China kind of painted themselves into a corner. They bought almost $3 trillion worth of U.S. dollar denominated securities for their reserves. Reserves are just your savings account. So, you know, if you make 50,000 and you spend 40, you've got 10,000 in savings. You can put it in the bank or the stock market or whatever. Well, it's no different with countries. When countries run a trade surplus, they have savings and they have to put it somewhere. And in China's case, those savings go into the trillions of dollars. Well, they put all their savings into, unfortunately for them, U.S. Treasury notes. Now, there's an old saying in banking, if I owe you $1 million, I have a problem. But if I owe you $1 billion, you have a problem because you have to collect the money from me. So since we owe China $3 trillion, they have a problem. They can't dump those securities. They might want to, but the market's not that big. So what are they doing instead? They're buying gold by the thousands of tons. And just to put that in perspective, there are only about 33,000 tons of official gold in the world. Official gold means the gold held by central banks and sovereign wealth funds and the finance ministries and so forth. So it's only about 33,000 tons in the world. China has bought about 3,000 tons, or 10% of all the official gold in the world, just in the last 4 years. Now, they have not disclosed this, by the way. You have to gather this from mining output, Hong Kong imports, covert sources. They're using military and intelligence assets to do this. But the evidence is there, and this is all in my book as well. So why are they doing that? Well, they're creating a hedge position. In other words, they can't dump the treasuries, but if we inflate the dollar, which we're trying to do, Janet Yellen has said we need more inflation. Inflation is just theft from savers. I mean, inflation sounds like a technical word. Just think of it as someone reaching in your pocket and stealing your money. That's what inflation is. So Janet Yellen says we need more inflation. In other words, we need more theft from savers. Well, China's the biggest saver in the world. They got $3 trillion, as I mentioned. So if we inflate the dollar, they're going to lose on their paper. But if they have enough gold, gold's going to go up a lot. So they're going to lose on the paper, but they're going to make it up on the gold. So that's a way to hedge their position without dumping the treasury securities. That's what the Chinese are doing. Over to Russia, we're in a financial war with Russia. Of course, Russia invaded Crimea. It's causing trouble in eastern Ukraine. No one, left, right, or center, thinks there should be a military response to that, and there's not going to be. But the U.S. doesn't want to be seen to be doing nothing, kind of rolling over, playing dead. So the president has announced economic sanctions, which are a form of financial warfare. By the way, we've been in a financial war with Iran, or had been from 2012 up until the end of 2013. But the president sort of called a truce in that war and eased up on the sanctions on Iran. That was part of that stab in the back I mentioned earlier. But now we're in a financial war with Russia. By the way, these sanctions are fairly tame. You know, it sort of amounts to the fact that a few oligarchs may not get to go to the Super Bowl next year. But the bottom line on all that is Russia's different from Iran. They can fight back. They can seize U.S. assets in Russia. They can dump U.S. Treasury securities, raise our interest rates, sink our stock market. They can unleash their hackers to shut down the New York Stock Exchange. So the U.S. has to be careful about going too far in that realm because Russia can fight back. So
James,
all three of these legs.
Let me just throw this in, and people just joined us. James Rickards is our guest. He's the best-selling author of Currency Wars, if you just tuned in, and he's breaking down what his new book gets into that just came out a few months ago, The Death of Money, the Coming Collapse of the International Monetary System. And I want you to quantify for folks, when you say U.S., I guess you mean the collection of special interests kind of allied with the Anglo-American establishment, or correct me if your view is different than mine, and what their worldview is. I see them pushing such a complex strategy that there isn't even really a strategy at all. They just think there's a strategy, and they're destabilizing the whole world in a belief that they can manage crises for more personal gain for the political and elite corporate class, but in the overall, losing true American soft power in the end and bringing in a global crisis that basically could end superpower status for the United States, and we become some weird hermit third world, dictatorship of the totalitarians.
Well, there is a difference between the United States government and America the Beautiful. I do think that's important to bear in mind. I'm really speaking about the government and official actions.
Sure, but what do you think of what they've done?
Alex,
yeah, well, I mean, what do you think of what they've done?
Well, look, I just I don't have to get into any hidden conspiracies. I just take their actual words. I met with members of the Federal Open Market Committee. I've met with central bankers, and privately, not publicly, but privately, they will tell you they don't know what they're doing. They are making it up as they go along.
Exactly.
They say, we try this. If it doesn't work, we pull it back. If it works, we try a little more. I mean, the Federal Reserve has had 15 separate policies since 2009. the forward guidance. First it was 2012, then it was 2013, now it's 2015, QE1, QE2, QE3, which had Part A, Part B, Operation Twist, currency wars, you name it. I mean, on and on and on. When you have 15 policies in 5 years, you don't know what you're doing.
Exactly. So bottom line,
it's basically
bottom line, Judgment Day is coming. And the question is, what will Judgment Day look like?
Well, Judgment Day will look like a collapse of confidence in the U.S. dollar. And, people say the dollar isn't backed by anything. Actually, it is backed by one thing. This is what Paul Volcker says, and I think he's right. It's backed by confidence. If people believe the dollar is a store of value, they will continue to use dollars. But the minute they stop believing that, the dollar can collapse like a house of cards. Now, the problem with the Federal Reserve in particular, and I would say the U.S. Treasury, they take confidence for granted.
The Death of Money is the book, available in bookstores everywhere. The Coming Collapse of the International Monetary System. Since his book came out, we've seen the acceleration away from the dollar, and we've seen food prices and a lot of other things increase, even with the Cook numbers. We're going to talk to him about that, when the collapse is going to accelerate, or can it be staved off at this point with his expert view. And then the big issue, insider trading 9/11, with our guest James Rickards here in just a moment. First off, a couple issues. The new issue, we sell them in bulk at cost to wake up friends and family. You can buy 10 of these for the cost of regular glossy 60-something page magazine. The InfoWars special report, Welcome to America, double cover. And it gets into the treason of opening our borders and giving the free welfare to the illegals. Now that's part of the North American Union, in General Petraeus' own words. And it covers a lot more in the new issue, available in groups of 10 up to 100 to sell in your store, hand out to friends and family, or give to the city council or the police department, or to donate to the library. InfoWarsStore.com, or call toll-free 888-253-3139. Also, in the month of July, at Maiden1776.com, or just go to InfoWarsStore.com and click on the Maiden1776 link, all of the Made in America, Molon Labe, Come and Take It, limited edition belt buckles, water bottles, Navy SEAL produced bottle breachers, Molon Labe men and women's T-shirts, all the anti-socialist George Washington apparel that drives socialists into hissy fits, all made in America, InfoWarsStore.com. It's all massively discounted in the month of July. The golf shirts, all of it, InfoWarsStore.com. And lastly, in the month of July, we're doing that year-end special that we never do during the summer that's so popular, where you can get 5.3 months free on a yearly membership for the Nightly News, 7 o'clock weeknights, all the films, my book, Paul Watson's book, so many other films, live events, prisonplanet.tv, InfoWarsNews.com. Every membership for $5.95 a month can be used by 11 people simultaneously. Now, when you sign up for a year instead of a month, you get 5+ months free, almost half off, that we're offering right now for the month of July. Very popular special. I want to thank all of you that are members. That's InfoWarsStore.com or InfoWarsNews.com to sign up for that special. InfoWarsNews.com. And, of course, we've got discounts going with promo code WATER on the great ProPure water filtration systems if you don't want to drink the glyphosates and fluoride. And all of your purchases support this unabashed, hardcore, openly truthful, openly libertarian, openly biased towards liberty and the truth, Infowars.com, radio, TV, nightly news, documentary film, news site, news combine that reaches close to 20 million people a week one way or another. What the Wall Street Journal and others have called the model of new media in the last decade, and only growing faster with our team of reporters and everybody else and all the amazing guests. So I want to thank you all for your financial support. We don't get your money like MSNBC through stimulus money or NPR with taxpayer money. We're funded by free association, you deciding to become PrisonPlanet.tv members, deciding to get the fine supplements at InfoWarsLife.com, and I want to thank all of you. All right, going back to our guest, who is the best-selling author of, well, multiple books, highly recommended from Max Keiser. Everything he's saying from my research is spot on, but he goes deeper with his different connections inside the Federal Reserve and the defense establishment. JamesRickardsProject.com, or just Google James Rickards and his site will come up. The new book is The Death of Money, and he joins us via audio Skype now. Be sure and go check his website out. You can see him on Fox News and other channels as well. Some very informative videos up there. So boiling it all down, this is going to happen. The question is, when will it happen? And my issue for you is, I'm not an economist or a top investor like you who's made so many accurate predictions. I know it's coming, but I already see prices increasing everywhere as the controlled media tells me prices aren't going up very much. I already see when I travel out of the country, the dollar is frowned upon. In places just a few years ago, it was smiled upon. I already see all over the place signs of real depression in many areas. And then I see the government gearing up for civil unrest, the Department of Defense admitting it. I mean, they've got to know Obamacare is going to shut down the economy. Shutting down power plants is going to shut down the economy. They've got to know open borders, all of this. I mean, you're saying it's a bunch of ineptitude, and I know they have been trying everything under the sun. I'm sure that's part of it, but isn't there the vulture capitalist, crony capitalist angle of this, that a lot of insiders are going to make a lot of money out of a depression, or do you disagree with that, sir?
No, I think that's exactly right. And Exhibit A, I would say, is Warren Buffett. Now, look, Warren Buffett has this image as the avuncular sage of Omaha, the stock best friend, blah, blah, blah. But when it comes to billionaires, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. Warren Buffett's last two big acquisitions, go back a few years, he bought the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. Now, he bought the whole thing, by the way, and took it private. He didn't just buy a few shares. He bought the whole thing. Now, what is a railroad? A railroad is nothing but hard assets. It's right-of-way, mining rights adjacent to the right-of-way, rail, rolling stock, yards, switches, signals, etc. How does a railroad make money? It moves hard assets as freight: coal, corn, wheat, steel, etc. So a railroad is the ultimate hard asset. It's composed of hard assets, and it makes money moving hard assets. What was Warren Buffett's next big purchase? He bought oil and natural gas resources. And by the way, he doesn't need the Keystone Pipeline because he can move his own oil on his own railroad. You line up 100 tanker cars, you got a pipeline on wheels. So Warren Buffett is a guy who's dumping dollars as fast as he can, getting into hard assets. It doesn't matter what happens to the dollar. The dollar could be confetti, which has happened before to other currencies. He still owns a railroad. He still owns oil. He still owns natural gas. He owns things that people need. This is very similar, by the way, to what happened in the famous Weimar hyperinflation in the Weimar Republic in Germany in 1922 and 1923. We all know who the losers were. The losers were the middle class savers. If you had money in the bank, a pension, an annuity, an insurance policy, retirement income, a steady job, you were the loser because all of your fixed income assets were wiped out. But there were a lot of winners too. The winners were the industrialists, people with factories. If you have a factory, it's a factory. It doesn't matter what the currency does. People who had gold in Switzerland, people who had assets overseas, they were the winners because they were not wiped out. Then they went around and bought up all the losers, consolidated industrial holdings into relatively few hands. Then they decided that Hitler would be a good puppet for them. That didn't work out too well in the long run, but we've seen this movie before. So watch what Buffett does. He's dumping paper money, getting into hard assets. But there are many, many other examples. And, Alex, when we talk about this collapse, I think the government and the Federal Reserve would like to avoid it, but there's another part of them that knows it's coming. So they've got their own plan B ready. And like we said earlier, you don't have to, break into a safe in the middle of the night. They actually put this stuff on their website. Go to the IMF website, the International Monetary Fund website. They published a paper in January 2011. It's on the website. And it's a 10-year plan to make the SDR, that's the special drawing right. SDR stands for special drawing right, the global reserve currency. Now, what's an SDR? Well, it stands for special drawing right. That's a really geeky name. What it is world money. Now, so why did they call it an SDR? Well, they knew if they called it world money, it might scare people. So they gave it this really, technical name so people would sort of yawn and look somewhere else. It's kind of like the Federal Reserve. I mean, the Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States. Why did they not call it the Central Bank of the United States in 1913? Because they knew that Americans hate central banks. So they called it the Federal Reserve. Well, the same thing with this world money. It's the special drawing right. Now, By the way, there's nothing new about SDRs. They were invented in 1969. They've been issued from time to time. They were actually issued in 2009. I might have been the only guy outside the IMF to notice. But this is just printed money. And by the way, the easiest way to understand it, it's not that technical. The Federal Reserve has a print press. They can print dollars. The European Central Bank has a printing press. They can print euros. The IMF has a printing press. They can print SDRs. And they do. And they have. And they're not backed by anything. And it'll be highly inflationary, except when we... So the next time there's a liquidity crisis, remember the last time there was a liquidity crisis and a financial panic in 2008, the Fed bailed out the whole world. We know they printed $4 trillion, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. They did tens of trillions of dollars of swaps, guarantees, with the FDIC, guaranteed every bank deposit in America, guaranteed every money market fund in America, propped up the system for the benefit of, the elites, the power elites who actually benefit the most from that. But there's a problem. They're tapped out. In other words, they haven't unwound any of that. A lot of that's still in place. So when the next crisis comes, it's going to be bigger than the Fed. They're not going to be able to go to 8 trillion or 12 trillion on their balance sheet, because they'll destroy confidence. So where is the liquidity going to come from? It's going to come from the IMF in the form of SDRs. It will be highly inflationary, but no one will understand where it's coming from. I call the IMF transparently non-transparent. And what I mean by that is they're transparent in the sense that they put these plans on their website, but they're non-transparent in the sense that no one understands them because it's all technical.
Sure, exactly. They try to play both sides, and they consolidate power on the way up in the bubble. They consolidate power during the collapse, always posing as the savior. They never get in trouble. So you've broken down the technicals beautifully, and I know your book gets into more detail. How bad is it going to get? Because they're funding destabilizations in Eastern Europe. They're funding, this new caliphate running around, starting a civil war, blowing up Shiite mosque. Look, I understand they don't know what they're doing at many levels, trying to put it off so they can say they tried to do it. But on the other hand, they're trying to destabilize things at the same time. I mean, the evidence is there. What do they think they're going to get out of this? Where is America going? How bad is it going to get? And what's the time frame? Because am I wrong in saying that we're seeing major signs that the creep towards the exits at the movie theater is starting to get a little bit faster here? Because it looks like the dollar's in trouble here.
Well, the dollar's in trouble, but so are global capital markets, and the signs are everywhere, Alex. Let me give you a very concrete example. So we're watching the stock indices. I guess the stock market's off a tiny bit today, but they've been going up and up and up. They're at all-time highs. They're at record highs. And the mainstream media says, hey, happy days are here again. Stock market's at an all-time high. Get out there and buy some stocks. Meanwhile, this is going up on very high leverage, meaning borrowed money. So New York Stock Exchange leverage is at an all-time high, and it's going up on very thin volume, which means that not many people are participating. But meanwhile, what the experts, the pros, are buying put options. Now, a put option is a way to bet that the market's going down. So let's say I have a lot of stock and it's been going up and I've been making a lot of money. Well, I might want to get out, but if I start selling the stock, I might be the snowflake that causes the avalanche, and I don't want that to happen. So what they do is they go over here to a different market. They buy put options, which is to bet the market's going to go down. Now, remember the Chinese, they got the paper, but they also have the gold. Yeah. The pros have the stocks, but they also have they're hedging. So when the market crashes, the little guy's going to get wiped out on his 401k, but the big guys, they'll lose money on their stocks, but they're going to make money on their puts and lock in their profits. This is the kind of thing that's going on behind the scenes. You have to be a bit of an expert, a bit of a technician to see it, but it is visible. All this is publicly available.
And it's accelerating, correct? They're not just hedging now. From what I've seen, they're piling on to getting out of all the pop assets on the NASDAQ and the Dow Jones, and they're moving into the most hardcore of stable assets.
Right. Well, they want to. Well, some of them are doing that. Warren Buffett's a good example. But for people who want to hedge themselves without, because remember, if you start selling the stock, you might be the guy who causes the avalanche. What they're doing is keeping the stock to some extent, but buying these put options. So now they're hedged. The market could go down. They don't care because whatever they lose in the stocks, they'll make in the puts. But the little guy is not a.
How long can this go on? How long can this go on?
Well, one of the hard things is some of these things can go on longer than you expect. It won't go on forever. I don't think it'll go on much longer. I don't think we'll get 2 or 3 years down the road. We might not get 1 year down the road. I don't want to say it's going to happen tomorrow because look, the thing about bubbles is they go on longer than we expect. But I wouldn't be waiting for the day. See, a lot of people, I talk about this all over the world, Alex, and people invariably come to me and they say something to the effect of, hey, Jim, call me at 3 o'clock the day before it crashes. I'll sell my stocks and buy gold. And I say, it doesn't work that way. I'm not going to know the day before. I can see it coming for sure, but I'm not going to know the day before. The time to prepare is now. The time to get out of stocks, get some gold. Don't go overboard. I recommend 10% gold. Other kinds of hard assets, sure. Fine art, et cetera. The time to do that is now. By the way, for the small investor, when you want gold, when gold starts gapping up, when I say gapping up, $100 an ounce, boom. Next day, up $200 an ounce, boom. Next day, up $300 an ounce. A week goes by, it's up $1,000 an ounce. It's running away. That's when most people are going to say, oh, gee, I better get some gold. Guess what? You're not going to be able to find it. The mint will stop shipping. Your local dealer will be out. The big
You want to get it beforehand.
Sovereign wealth funds. Correct. That's exactly right.
Well, look at the Chinese government, the University of Texas. They've all been quietly hoarding it while they use all these naked shorts and things to drive down the overall price of gold. But as real inflation kicks in all commodities, I don't think they can suppress the price of gold much longer. I would imagine it's going to go up in the fall. What do you say?
It usually does go up in the fourth quarter. Fourth quarter is usually strong for gold. I think the technical setup is good. I was in Switzerland recently, and on this last trip, instead of visiting the banks, which I usually do, I went to see the guys who actually store gold, the top secure logistics firms in the world, and the guys who actually refine gold. So people handling the physical stuff. They told me stories that'll make your hair stand on down. I talked to the largest refiner in Switzerland. He said he's working triple shifts, so 24 hours a day. He's producing 20 tons of gold a week. The Chinese are taking half, so there's 10 tons of gold a week going to China times 50 weeks. That's 500 tons a year. Remember, I mentioned earlier, there's not that much official gold in the world. So he said the Chinese want more, but he said I won't sell it to them because I have to take care of my regular customers. And he said for the first time, I'm having trouble sourcing gold, meaning, when you're a refiner, you take gold from, scrap and jewelry and miners and other 400-ounce bars, and you re-refine it into what the Chinese want, which are 1 kilobars of 4.9 purity. He said, I'm having trouble sourcing it. I said, well, when was the last time that happened? He said, it's never happened. So the technical setup is very strong. Gold is just, the reason gold had a weak year in 2013 was because the Exchange Traded Fund, GLD, that's the ticker symbol, disgorged 500 tons. That was a raid on the GLD warehouse by the big banks who control that warehouse because they were sending that gold to China. Well, you can't do that twice. I mean, you can do it once because they had, I guess, about 1,100 tons at the beginning of the year. So take away 500 tons. Now you're down to 600 tons. So now is the time, in your view, to buy gold, but people never do. They only buy once it's racing up. It's of course, I buy when it's low. I bought most of my gold at about $300 to $500 and haven't sold any of it. We're going to come back and go to break, sir, and I want to segue into really the bombshell information that you let out a little bit on Max Kaiser's show on RT a few months ago. I know it was in Der Spiegel and some of the German newspapers at the time, but you were a witness, according to Max, to this, to some of the insider trading prior to 9/11. So I want to go to break and come back in the next two little short segments and really, have you break that down and what that signifies, because, you're saying you don't know the day before something's going to happen, but other people did. And I remember also in the papers, it wasn't just that. There were, FBI agents and Secret Service people, and there were little kids that said those towers won't be there next week. And then that all got shut down. So there was a lot of people that knew, a lot of people that across the board who didn't go to work that day. And those are not conspiracy theories. The media has tried to turn it into those with red herring fake stories and things. But undoubtedly, that's a big deal. So our guest, James Rickards, has a lot of courage, best-selling author of Currency Wars. He's going to come back and talk about that. The Death of Money, the Coming Collapse of the International Monetary System, is his new book. And I've not read it yet. It just came in last week, and I've had family in town and stuff and then been out of town. But I'm going to read it immediately. But hearing him talk, it's some of the most cogent, focused analysis I've ever heard. I'm your host, Alex Jones. Third hour is coming up. Our guest will be with us a little bit into the third hour. Then I plan to get into other news and open the phones up. Here's a headline out of Voice of Russia. Beijing, Seoul, that's South Korea's capital, agree to direct trade in national currencies. That's a big deal. Those two have a massive amount of trade that then ends up here. I mean, the dollar is being cut off every day. And it is just very, very frightening, because I talk to the average person out there and they say, I don't care if they shut down coal power plants. I don't care if they shut down somebody's business. I don't own it. I don't care if the dollar dies. Let it die. Alex, this system needs to come down. America's corrupt. I'm sick of it. Let it all come down. Well, yeah, it is corrupt, but it's not America. It's a multinational system, and it's going to hurt us, folks. It's going to hurt the average person. I don't care if the stock market goes down. I don't own any stock. It affects everybody you work for, where you go.
the bonuses you get. It's ridiculous how self-centered the average American is. And I'm not saying everybody, but we were very morally upright people on average when we had the Great Depression, and it was rough. And I think what we're about to see could be even worse. What do you briefly say to that, James Rickards, best-selling author and top analyst, about what a depression would look like with this type of population?
Well, if you want to know what a depression looks like, look around, Alex. We're in a depression. This depression started in 2007, and it will continue indefinitely until we get some structural changes, which I don't see on the horizon. Now, a lot of people don't know what the meaning of a depression is. They assume it means continuous declining GDP, but that is not the definition. You can have growth in a depression. What it means is the growth is depressed relative to trend. So a trend, long-term trend of growth in the United States is, say, 3.5%. And by the way, in the short run, you can grow 4, 5, or even 6%, as we did during some of the years when Ronald Reagan was president, because you're bringing unemployed people back into the labor force at a faster rate. So trend is 3.5%. Short-term growth is 4 or 5%. But if you're actually growing at 1, 2%, which we are, that's a depression. It's the gap between the potential and the actual. And that represents lost wealth, and you never make it up. So, I mean, you have to be 90 years old today to have a living memory of the Great Depression. So essentially, basically no one knows what it feels like. Well, except we do. It feels like this. And I've had people say, well, Jim, if we're in a depression, where are the soup lines? The soup lines are at Whole Foods, because you get your food stamps on a little debit card, and you can walk into Whole Foods and get some gourmet soup to go. So it's not that we don't have soup lines, but they're just in the supermarkets. They're not on the streets. But you look at labor force participation, you look at real wages, you look at unemployed, underemployed, people working part-time, wish they had full-time jobs, actual growth. We're in a depression now. Now, could it get worse? Yes, it could get a lot worse, because you can put a financial panic or financial collapse on top of a depressed economy, and that's what I see coming.
Sure. I mean, if the welfare checks don't show up, or if they don't have the buying power, it's the same of them not showing up. Cities will burn. I mean, that's just a fact. And the Pentagon knows that. Do they think a bunch of armored vehicles are going to keep everybody safe?
Well, they're hoping it doesn't come to that, but they're certainly prepared for it. I mean, we see, not news really, the militarization of local police. As I say, these are not, your local police force are not people who get kittens out of trees. They've got flashbang grenades, high-tech battering rams, night vision goggles, tear gas, automatic weapons, body armor, armor personnel carriers, and they'll break down your door for, a simple, credit card fraud or something. So, and there was a case the other day where sadly they threw a grenade and blew the face off a 2-year-old child sleeping in a crib. So that's your local police force.
But if you're illegal and have an aggravated felony, you can come right on in. I mean, this is becoming bizarro world. What does your gut tell you? Because, rich elites can always run to the next safe country. But to me, the United States does not look like a very good place to be during a full-on collapse. 20% chance of full-on collapse, 50%. I mean, the depression just keeps getting worse and worse. I agree by all metrics. We've been in a depression since 2008 or earlier. Most real economists agree with that. But, I mean, how bad will it get?
Well, the next financial crisis will be the worst in history, Alex. And that's not just an opinion or a wild guess. It's actually based on the science of complexity, which I talk about in both my books, The Death of Money and Currency Wars. Complexity theory basically looks at the scale of a system. That's a fancy word for size, but here's the point. When you triple the scale of a system, you don't triple the risk. You increase the risk by an exponential factor, 10 or 100 times. So in 2008, what did we hear about ad nauseum? Too big to fail, too big to fail, too big to fail. Well, guess what? The 5 biggest banks in the United States in 2008 today are bigger. They have a larger percentage of all the banking assets. Their derivatives books are bigger. So everything that was too big in 2008 is bigger today, which means the next collapse will be exponentially bigger. And it was all the Fed could do to put out the fire last time. The next one's going to be bigger than the Fed. It's going to be over to the IMF. And there's no, by the way, I talked earlier about these special drawing rights. That's the world money, the IMF issues. Well, there's no way they're issuing that without Russian, Chinese, and other people's approval, because they're all members of the IMF. The G20 is sort of the de facto board of directors of the IMF. And they're not going to say, hey, let's just issue a bunch of SDR so we can prop up the dollar. They're going to say, let's issue SDR so we can bury the dollar once and for all. Now, the impact of this is just inflationary at best, and possibly hyperinflationary. It doesn't mean the dollar is going to go away. You'll still have dollars, but they'll be like Mexican pesos. In other words, the dollar will be a local currency that you use to go down to, you know, restaurant or hairdresser or whatever, but it won't be used for the big things. When I say the big things, the price of oil, settlement of balance of payments between countries, probably the financial statements of the 100 or so largest global corporations. So, you know, a few years from now, when you get your financial statement from IBM or General Electric, it'll all be stated in SDRs because they're really global corporations. So this SDR is the coming thing. Now, it might not work. It will definitely be tried. As I say, the blueprint's already there. It's on the IMF website. Secretary Geithner talked about it. He said he was open to it. Madame Lagarde, Christine Lagarde, head of the IMF, talks about it all the time. So the plan is already there. It will definitely be tried. Whether it works or not is a different question. If people lose confidence in the dollar, why would they have any more confidence in another form of paper money called the SDR? Well, if it works, it will only be because no one understands it, which is why education is so important. That's why I've read my books and do interviews like this one, just try to explain it to people in very straightforward terms. If it fails, however, which it might, then you're probably going to have to bring gold back into the picture, not because you want to, but because you have to, just to restore some confidence. But there's another side to this, which is as what I call the money riots break out, as confidence is lost, as society begins to disintegrate, you'll see a neo-fascist response, executive orders, militarized local police, National Guard. We already have the wiretapping. We already have the surveillance. The cameras are there. By the way, every toll booth in America, we think they're there to collect tolls. They're actually surveillance and interdiction points. And the new thing, of course, is the driverless car. Well, imagine going around a driverless car and the government wants to turn it off and come and get you.
Meanwhile, the LAPD announced what they'd already been doing covertly. Even felony illegals are going to be released now, carte blanche, above the law. So you have to be illegal to be above the law now. And the Texas Civil Rights Commission, that's basically a communist front group, is openly in Austin criticizing the sheriff for even arresting felony illegals. And you wonder how the illegals come here from all over the world to rape and kill and serial kill. From Eastern Europe and Africa and Latin America. We always pick on Latin America because that's 80+%. I mean, is people fleeing justice? You just get on a plane or a bus, you're here, you're legal. I mean, this is crazy town by the elite. And L.A. is a total globalist takeover base, the third worldization. And look at this image if you're watching this on TV. LAPD no longer comply with feds on immigration hold request. And it just shows them all up there. And there's a video announcement that if you're illegal, you're above the law. They will not hold illegals to be picked up by us when they've committed crimes. They will just release them. And then I just can't believe it. That's political correctness. I guess if I robbed a bank, the cops pull up with guns out and I go, hey, don't be racist. They probably say, Mr. Jones, let us escort you with the money right to your vehicle. I mean, literally. Wow. All right. Shifting gears into the big subject and giving him the floor to break it down. Insider trading 9/11. Please tell us, sir, again, for folks that just tuned in, what you were doing at the time, your background. James Rickards, again, best-selling author of The Death of Money and of Currency Wars, joins us. He's been on with us for over an hour, getting into the current financial situation. But now, the big enchilada. We know it was in Der Spiegel and a few other publications, if you just joined us, that there was insider trading connected to the executive director of the CIA, Buzzy Krongard. That investigation got shut down. He was inside one of these major financial institutions while this was going on and is one of the only witnesses to what happened. And I want to give you the floor, James. Now, you have a lot of courage to talk about this. Tell us exactly what you saw.
Well, a couple things, Alex. The first thing, I think the most important one, you have to distinguish between inside trading and what some commentators call inside job. And these get blurred together. Insider trading just means somebody knew about the attack in advance and they went into markets and either sold stocks or bought put options, which is the same thing as selling stocks, or they bought bonds, which are different, to make money when the attack happened. That is non-debatable. I cover this in chapter 1 of my book. It happened. There was insider trading. There's tons of evidence of it. When I say evidence, I mean statistical, forensic, anecdotal. It absolutely happened. Now, inside job is different. That somehow suggests that the government, U.S. government, had something to do with it. I've seen no evidence of that. And by the way, I went down there. Now, after 9/11, I mean, I'm talking in the immediate days, not 6 months or a year later when it was a memorial and a tourist attraction. I'm talking when flames were still coming out of the rubble. The military set up a secure perimeter around Lower Manhattan. There were various checkpoints at Canal Street and Church Street, if you know the area. You needed security clearance or some official business, or you had to be in the maintenance of one of those buildings, et cetera, to get inside that perimeter. I was inside that perimeter. I went to the roof of the American Express building, which after the two towers and World Trade Center 7 came down, the American Express building was the tallest building. This is in the World Financial Center, across the street from the World Trade Center. I went out on the roof. It was not an observation deck. It was a roof. I went out there and I looked straight down into the flaming ruins of the World Trade Center. And I was reminded of Rodin's sculpture, The Gates of Hell. I thought the gates of hell had been opened and I was looking into them. That's what I saw. So, these armchair engineers who talk about controlled demolition and all this stuff, I mean, there's zero proof of that. That's a lot of nonsense. Some guy said to me, oh, there are 2,000 engineers who
No, I understand your proviso that you're not a 9/11 truther, but specifically insider trading, prior knowledge that something was coming on American and United.
Correct. Well, first of all, there is a ton of statistical evidence. By the way, the 9/11 Commission never said that there wasn't insider trading. What they said was that they found no evidence of insider trading. But if you don't look, you're not going to find the evidence. So that was sort of a lawyer's, wiggle room to get out of actually dealing with the issues. The 9/11 Commission report itself does not say that there wasn't insider trading. Now, about a year after 9/11, I was asked by the Central Intelligence Agency to join a project that looked into the possibility of a future attack. And what we said was, okay, if there was insider trading ahead of 9/11, could you have seen it? And if another spectacular attack was coming, would there be insider trading again? Could you detect it from market signals? Could you get a FISA warrant, break down the door, and stop the attack? And we spent years studying that, and I was a co-director of that project. And I met with the people at the SEC who did the investigation from the 9/11 Commission. I worked with the CIA on this. I worked with hundreds of volunteers, Nobel Prize winners, et cetera. So I was very, very involved in this, and we wrote the definitive study of this. Now, here's the thing. If you're a detective and you find a body with a bullet hole in the head, but there was no witnesses, it doesn't mean you can't prove the crime. It just means you need some other kind of evidence. If you don't have eyewitness evidence, you use DNA. Well, the DNA equivalent in stock markets is statistical evidence, and there were numerous academic studies, and they're all cited in my book. My book has 300 footnotes, so I don't make things up. There's tons of documentation. Any reader can go find the source material. That there was no question that the put buying, by the way, put buying is a bet that the stock's going to go down, before 9/11 was enormous. It would be as if, a guy ordered one ham and cheese sandwich for lunch every day for 10 years, and then one day he ordered 300 ham and cheese sandwiches. That's the kind of put buying we saw in the last 5 trading days prior to 9/11. I met at CIA headquarters with John Mulhern. John Mulhern was the head of one of the 4 largest specialists on the New York Stock Exchange. He was the market maker in American Airlines stock. And I looked at him, I said, John, was there insider trading in American Airlines ahead of 9/11? He said, it was the most blatant case of insider trading I've ever seen. By the way, since my book came out, Alex, it's kind of interesting. There are people with additional information who have contacted me. They've come forward almost like they want to get something off their chest. So there are stories that are not in my book because these people contacted me after the book came out. But one of the most chilling stories, a fellow came to me. He was a dealer at one of the so-called primary dealers. They're the biggest banks in the government securities market. He handles sovereign wealth funds, which are the biggest traders in the government securities market. So here's a guy, the biggest trader for the biggest dealers in U.S. government securities. On September 10th, the day before 9/11, he was actually out of the office at an outing. His phone rang. His trading assistant said, hey, there's someone on the phone. They want to buy $2 billion of 2-year Treasury notes. Now, $2 billion is an enormous order. The biggest firms, they might trade 100 million at a time or sometimes larger. $2 billion of 2-year notes is an off-the-charts order. This customer had never called before. It wasn't as if it was a long-standing customer, and it was a sovereign wealth fund. He didn't tell me the name of the country, but I think you can infer that it might be Saudi Arabia. But and then he did the trade. Of course, the next day, 9/11 comes. Those securities soared in value, so that trader made a fortune, and then he never heard from the customer again. So, when a customer, when someone who's never spoken to you before calls the day before the attack, buys $2 billion of 2-year notes, the next day the attack comes, the securities go up, the guy makes a fortune, walks away, never heard from him again. This is the kind of stuff that was going on. It was going on a very large scale. Not even all the stories have come out. So, no question about insider trading. Now, where I fault the government was for not looking. And just to bring that story forward to the present day and what we were talking about earlier, Alex, with the death of the dollar, we all know what happened in Ukraine in March and April of 2014 this year, just prior to the invasion. Russia, which owns a lot of U.S. Treasury securities in its central bank, started dumping U.S. Treasuries last October. Was anybody looking at that? In other words, if you're Russia and you know you're going to invade Crimea and you think the U.S. is going to push back with economic sanctions, you want to mitigate the impact of the sanctions by lightening your load of U.S. Treasury securities. Well, they started doing that in October. So my criticism of the U.S. government is not that they were in on it. I think that's nonsense, but that they weren't looking then. They're not looking now. And these techniques that you need to look at it are not that difficult because hedge funds do it every day.
Sure. James, though, look, obviously you're a smart guy. I know you got brought in by the CIA to do this report because there are good people in all these agencies. There's also bad actors and bad subgroups. Some history's shown that. Clearly, when you had some of the supposed hijackers trained at U.S. bases in all sorts of spy training, and then that got covered up. Clearly, you had Iraq being attacked, not Saudi Arabia. Clearly, you have the police state being set up on the backs of the attack of 9/11, the lying about the dust. When I say inside job, I mean the system stood to gain from this on so many fronts. And it's Saudi Arabia right now driving the bus with these attacks and this new invasion of Syria and Iraq, that certain power structures, Carlyle Group and others, stood to gain from this. And there's enough to investigate it. I mean, even 6 of the 10 commissioners have said the official story did not reflect reality. So what do you say to that?
Well, you can gain from it and not know why you're gaining, and that happens all the time. Let me give you a very simple example. So let's say a very small trade goes through. So there's someone with inside information. They know the attack is coming. They do a trade. Now, who would that person be? Well, it could be a cook, a driver, a safe house operator, an associate, a brother, father, sister, mother. Everyone has a social network, and there was definitely a wider group than the hijackers themselves, of course, who knew about this attack coming. And people in that position cannot resist some insider trading. And when people are skeptical of that, they say, why would you compromise operational security? I have a 2-word answer, which is Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart was a legitimate billionaire. She made $1 billion through honesty and hard work, but she ended up behind bars because she couldn't resist a little securities fraud involving a tip on insider trading. So that's the human nature side of it. Now, here's what happens. So that trade goes through. Now, there was no news that day. If somebody's buying put options and there's bad news about the airlines, that's one thing. But when the market's going up, the sector's going up, all the other airlines are going up, and someone's buying puts on United Airlines and American Airlines, and there's no news, then you know somebody knows something you don't. So you might buy more put options yourself. That doesn't make you a criminal or an insider trader. It just makes you actually a very smart trader. This is what's called the piggyback, or technically the name for it is signal amplification. So by the end of the day, it's not surprising that there was a massive volume of puts.
Sure, I understand word of mouth. I mean, if you told one person, I found a bunch of gold laying around at the foot of this hill, in 10 hours, there'd be 100 people out there looking for gold. And there'd be people looking for gold 100 years after the gold was already picked up. That rumor would never die. I get signal amplification. What I don't get is Mayor Willie Brown, San Francisco Chronicle, on screen September 12th, told not to fly to New York by Condoleezza Rice, it turned out, National Security Advisor, on September 10th. Joint Chiefs of Staff canceled a meeting in New York 2 days before 9/11. Source, ABC News. I mean, my issue here is you look at problem, reaction, solution, and the radical transformation of America into a police state that you were just talking about earlier, and the NSA and the rest of it, and you see the wrong country attacked, not Saudi Arabia, but Iraq. I mean, you can see why people don't buy into the official story, because if you questioned insider trading, they said, oh, you're a liar, it doesn't exist. If you questioned our sickening relationship with Saudi Arabia, oh, they're perfect, shut up, you're racist. I mean, I think that's why people don't buy the official story of 9/11.
Well, look, I'm a simple guy, Alex. I stick to facts. And look, I get attacked by the mainstream for talking about insider trading ahead of 9/11. I get attacked by the truthers for not buying into controlled demolition of World Trade Center 7. So I probably have it right if I'm on that middle ground. By the way, this stuff about, as I said, I was there. The armchair engineers can think what they want. I was there. There was nothing controlled about that. There was not a demolition. I mean, I was inside the American Express building on the 17th floor, which was Lehman Brothers headquarters at the time, the face of the building was ripped off. So I'm inside the building looking out at a blue sky with girders stuck into that space with the face of the building ripped off by what was really a wave of metallic debris that came over because there was so much of it. That was not a controlled demolition. By the way, the biggest tenant in World Trade Center 7, United States government. So why would the U.S. government have a plot to blow up its own office and kill its own people? This is where these things fall down.
Well, they could put a lot of the records there, FBI, CIA, all based there, and the criminal group within government could then run the operation out of there and then burn it down. But listen, let's shift gears out of that. I respect people who disagree with me legitimately and who bring up real issues, and just to expand on what Kaiser had told me, that specifically you have interviewed people who were there at the terminals and could see the insider trading coming in and were basically blocked, not you specifically, but you wrote that report. So I appreciate your courage. I mean, I've already scanned through some of your book. I'm familiar with your work. I mean, I think you're being very truthful about warning the people, and we appreciate you. So I don't think there should be some orthodoxy of heresy where we politically burn you at the stake if you don't, you know, with your own perspective, agree with everything we're saying. I mean, the 9/11 truthers all fight with each other and have hundreds of different views. I get what you're saying. I don't think it's evil to look at it as an inside job. I don't think it's evil to not look at it as that. I think what we both agree is this. Regardless, it's been used to take our liberties, and our borders are basically wide open right now, and they haven't let a good crisis go to waste. They've used this to bring the military-industrial complex home, and we need to reverse this right now. It's not keeping us safe.
Well, that will get worse, Alex, and just on a going forward basis when this financial crisis comes. People are going to find, there's a lot of concern. Gee, not everybody can get out at once. People are going to find that they can't get out, that they're not going to be able to withdraw savings from the banks. The banks, that's the so-called bail-in, so their accounts are going to be blocked. ATMs are going to be shut off. Major institutions are going to be told that they cannot sell. It's not a question of, gee, can I sell at a good price? You won't be able to sell. So the architecture of the bail-in writ large is already there, and I'll be talking about that in future interviews. But the crisis is going to be a lot worse, but the response is going to be much more draconian.
Well, there you go. The bail-in. Spend a few more minutes if you can. Come back as soon as you want to get into that in great detail. We now see them announcing in Europe, places like Spain, oh, we want a tax on your money in the bank account. But it's only going to start, at a low percentage point. Oh, the Cyprus model. And then we see the laws and regulations being changed, the real-time surveillance of every financial system to do just that. That's the word I'm getting from, I mean, as you have contacts, I have contacts at, I'm not going to even say, at president level of major banks, big five banks. And they're scared and asking me what they think they should do. And then I'm asking them. I mean, it's kind of like we're passing a hand grenade around to each other with musical chairs. I mean, what's going to happen when they do a bail-in and you don't just can't get your money out, now they're stealing it?
Well, that's exactly right. And I do think, as I said, the next crisis is going to be bigger. It's going to be bigger than the Fed. They hope it goes away, but it's not going away. The economy, we're in a depression. We're going to stay in that indefinitely. It's just a matter of time. By the way, if you look at the very low volatility of the last 5 years, the period that it resembles most was 2002 to 2007. In other words, the period from 2009 to 2014, if you graph it by various metrics, it looks exactly like the period from 2002 to 2007. And we all know what happened next. So get ready.
And the derivatives overhang hasn't been dialed back. It's only been increased.
Well, that's right. And by the way, that's another interesting phenomena. This is a little bit technical, but the Fed is now experimenting with a massive exercise in what's called reverse repo. And I'll explain that very simply. Reverse repo is the Fed has all these government securities. How did they get them? Well, they printed money and they bought the government securities from the dealers, from the banks. And that's how they print money and get it out to the banking system. The problem is the dealers and the banks need the government securities as collateral for the derivatives because they want to leverage 10 to 1 or 100 to 1, et cetera, do the derivatives to prop up the asset markets. But when I do a derivative with you, I do a swap with you, you're like, hey, Jim, how do I know you're good for the money? Well, one of the ways you know is I'll send you treasury securities as collateral. So that's your guarantee that I'm going to perform my end of the deal. Well, what happens when the Fed buys up all the securities and the banks no longer have the securities to post as collateral to prop up the the derivatives, which are propping up the stock market. Well, the Fed's solution to that is they are now lending the securities back to the dealers on a short-term overnight basis and taking cash in return. So on the one hand, they're printing money to buy the securities. On the other hand, they're lending them back to the dealers overnight so they can post as collateral. That's how bad things are.
So they're reselling. They're reselling all these fraudulent financial instruments again.
Well, technically relending, but they're making them available through these so-called reverse repos. But that's right. But they buy them permanently by printing money, and then they lend them back temporarily. You say, why would you do that? Well, it's so that they can have collateral to support the derivatives books to prop up the stock market. This is, I'm actually, maybe I've been doing this too long, but I actually understand all these technicalities. It's what I do professionally, and right. It's just appalling, and it makes your hair stand on end.
Well, I appreciate you giving us extra time. Next time you come on, we'll just do an hour. We got about a minute or two left before break. I can't wait to read the book, but expanding on that, talking to the people in the CIA, talking to the folks in the military intelligence. I talked to some of those people as well. Most of them are compartmentalized, have never done anything wrong, have actually tried to help the country. And I mean, now they're having this big discussion about, is this on purpose or was it by design? I mean, I think in a complex system, you're going to have people playing every point of the board. So I think the answer is it's everything. Right. But we better decide to get back to freedom and back to justice, or we're going to go off the edge, as you said, into a hyper-fascism. I mean, what are people saying to you about the future of this country? Because in a fascist system, nobody's safe. We should all not want to go this direction.
Well, I had a meeting in the office of the Secretary of Defense, and I told a very senior official there, I said, look, the day will come when your destroyer, your cruiser will pull up to a fuel depot in Singapore, and you'll say to the operator, fill her up with fuel, and the operator will say, fine, pay me in special drawing rights, pay me in SDRs. And for the first time, you're going to have a forward deployed military that you have to finance in a currency that you don't print. And that was shocking to this very senior official. And then this individual said to me, you know, I hear you, it does sound like a national security threat, but the Treasury really doesn't like it when we talk about the dollar.
James Rickards, thank you so much for the time. The Death of Money, the new book. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Now you can watch The Alex Jones Show live as it happens at info.